One in Three is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own. Hi, warriors. Welcome to One in Three. I'm your host, Ingrid. Today's guest is courage and expertise in one powerful voice. She's joining us to share her personal experience with domestic violence, as well as her professional insight as a PhD-trained negotiation and relationship scientist. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Merideth Thompson. Hi, Dr. Merideth. Thank you for joining me today, and welcome to One in Three.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. I'm so stoked for our conversation.
So am I, and I think this is going to be a really eye-opening conversation probably for some. But before we get into all of that, could you just give us some background so we get to know you?
Sure. So in my day job, I am a negotiations professor, but my absolute passion right now is my business partner lab that I'm growing. And it came out of being stuck for at least 10 or 12 years too long in my first marriage, that I didn't realize until I'd left how bad it was for my well-being and how controlling my partner was about a whole lot of things. And so I just have this passion now for taking research. My role is mostly as a researcher. And so being able to look at the relationship science and translate it for non-academics so that people can use it in their lives and help them. Particularly, I'm focused on helping people who are stuck in what I call relationship limbo, kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, helping them figure out, like, do I stay? Do I go? And because you and I both know those years that you're stuck, those are years you cannot get back.
You're absolutely right. And this is perfect. I have not had a guest on who has a research. I mean, I know I have had guests who have looked at research, but you're really into the research and experience, personal experience too. So I think this is going to be a really awesome conversation. Relationship limbo happens a lot because I think when people who have not been exposed to abuse or violence, it's hard to understand what is abuse. Abuse isn't always physical violence. Physical violence definitely is abuse, but that's something that a lot of people struggle with, is trying to determine if what's happening is abuse or not. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yes. I mean, I will say I didn't realize what kind of relationship I was in until I was out of it. And I was talking with one of my research colleagues, about some of the things that happened, especially in the latter years of the marriage. And she's the one that kind of helped me see, like, you were in an abusive situation. And, I'm, that kind of messed with my identity. And I think it probably does a lot of people, because you don't see yourself being in that. I mean, I was the primary breadwinner, but I did not have control of the money. My spouse at the time did. And, there can be, physical abuse is awful. And it leaves a mark, whereas other forms of abuse, emotional, sometimes sexual, financial abuse, you don't see what happens because of it. There's no mark. And so I think for a lot of people, what it means is you just you ruminate about it. Like, did that really happen? Did he really say that? Or did she really do that? And, that rumination just keeps us stuck in like this vicious cycle. And the way I see it, since domestic abuse is really, the goal of it is power and control. And if the one who is engaging in abusive activity, their goal is really to control you. And so if they can get you to doubt your own reality, doubt yourself, that's their goal is getting fulfilled.
Yes. And they're so good at it because it's not constantly getting berated all the time. It's small comments. And then, like you said, you're wondering, did they really just say that? And then maybe it's followed by, oh, hey, let's go watch our favorite show. And like nothing happened.
Yeah, you get both, right? I mean, if they
Mm-hmm.
were awful to us all the time, um, that would be easier, I think, to clock. But when there's some niceness versus some, I'll just say meanness, yeah, I mean, it messes with your brain. There was a point in time, the last year I was married, where I seriously um, considered getting hidden cameras in my house. One, so that I could get evidence of the behavior and really be clear with myself, is like, is this what I'm experiencing, or am I just like crazy? Because basically I was told I was crazy. Um, and then later I thought, ooh, if I did that, I could show it to a friend who knows both of us and say, like, what is going on here? Like, is this okay? Or am I overreacting? I never did do that, but I thought about it a number of times, and I wonder what would I have saved myself from that situation earlier if I had done it, and especially shown a friend who would have said, Meredith, this is not okay.
Yeah, I think even if you don't show a friend, even if you're just tracking it, which is dangerous, especially now that there's apps you can go on
Mm-hmm.
and it's not traceable and you can document everything there. But back before, when it had to be like paper and pen,
Yes.
it's a dangerous situation to be tracking all of that, because they may be going through your things and they may find that. But
Yes.
if you're somehow able to keep a timeline of what's happening, you can go back and look yourself and be like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, see, that did happen
Did
last
happen.
time. I knew
Yes.
that, or they did
Yes.
say that. And
I will say I'd kind of forgotten about it until this moment, but during the last year, I had started a password protected Word document where I was logging things, just logging and journaling and just trying to get that clarity. And I did that because with the password protected, which I don't know that I would have thought about before, but several years before that, when I had been contemplating divorce, my then spouse came to me and he said, I know you're thinking about divorce. And I'm like, how do you know that? He said, oh, I was on your computer trying to see like what you might want for Christmas. And in the moment I was like, oh, okay. But that's BS. we all know that's BS. And so you never know when they're looking. And so, yeah, being very safe and strategic as we can to collect data
mhm.
so that we do get that clarity with ourselves.
I would, every once in a while, when he would start screaming, I would grab my phone and just hit record.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
And I would immediately send it to my sister and then delete it off my
Oh,
phone.
smart. Wow, that
But
is smart.
but even then, I just watched something. What did I watch recently? Where oh gosh, it was on YouTube. I get sucked into
Mm-hmm.
these YouTube things every once in a while.
Don't we all?
But it was this horrible story about this woman. She was a physician, and she was in this abusive relationship and marriage, and she was diagnosed with cancer, and she became very
Mm-hmm.
debilitated because of the cancer. But
Mm-hmm.
she started recording, and one time he took her phone as she was recording, so then you can hear it in her voice. She's like, give me back my phone. And you can tell she's just
Mm,
frantic, because
yes.
if he sees that she's recording, then who knows what would happen.
Yes. 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 And that's, in large part, I would say, because all of the relationship science and data says that, abuse starts out less frequent, becomes more frequent, but it also escalates in severity. And so almost without fail, if somebody starts out with, verbal or emotional abuse, eventually it will escalate to physical abuse. And so she had a right to be terrified. Yeah.
Definitely. I've had a friend who was saying, yeah, this person is okay in their relationship because she said it's not physical. And I said, well, it's not physical yet because it doesn't have to be
Mm-hmm.
physical.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's
Mm-hmm.
what it is, right? It escalates, like you said. And then I don't know, they just feel like they've lost control. What they were doing isn't working anymore. So they keep needing
Mm-hmm.
to step it up.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think there's a lot of commentary, particularly in American society, that if it's not physical, oh, well, it's not, it's not that big of a deal. Like, it's just words, sticks and stones and all that stuff. And so I think that's something, that we need to change the conversation about. I mean, we do it with teenagers who are bullied online. And, you know, all of us, I don't care how old we are, there's a 12-year-old that lives inside of us. You know, our 12-year-old self is still there. And so changing the conversation to one about where, you know, it's not just physical violence that matters, but it's the emotional, it's the financial, which is almost always there. If any other sort of abuse, like 98% of the time, they're controlling the money as well. That those types of abuse have an impact, and they do matter. It's not just like, you know, don't take things so personally. That's not appropriate.
Right. Broken bones, injuries, physical injuries, they're horrible. They are absolutely horrible. But you can go into the hospital and you can say, my arm is broken. I need this fixed. And that emotional abuse sits there. And not only do you have the abuse that's happening to you, but then you also have your own blame that you put on yourself for
totally
allowing it to happen, or staying too long, or, you know, why can't I just move on like everyone else tells me I should?
Yes. Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, and I will say at times myself included, I can think or recognize and say to myself, you know, at some point I started teaching him how to teach me. I taught him that he could do this. And it's not that we want to blame the victim, but, you know, it's also made it when I started dating again, like, I'm going to teach the people I date how to treat me. There's a book I read shortly after I started dating. I believe it's called The Confidence Code. And that is one of the principles of the book. It's focused on women, and it's teach people how to treat you. And so I would do that from the get-go. You know, if a guy was texting and then he kind of ghosted me or whatever, I had one in particular that he kind of got flaky and ghosted, and I was like, okay, whatever. And then he tried to come back several times and like reinitiate. And I'm like, nope. I mean, I would just ignore it. And weirdly enough, like 18 months later, maybe 2 years, I can't remember. I saw this guy move in across the parking lot from my townhouse, and he was out there playing with the dog, and I got in the car and I waved hello and went on. And then I saw him, I don't know, like a month or two later, and I realized it was that guy that had ghosted me and tried to reach back. And at that time, we lived in a small town. And so he texts, I can't remember if I texted him. I think he texted me after I left that second time, because I was like, I did this slow wave, like, oh crap, I think I actually know who that is. And he said, hey, yeah, it is me. I noticed you had a man around, and so, you know, everything's cool. But it was creepy. It was really creepy.
Oh, that is creepy.
Yeah.
Like, did he move there on purpose?
I have no idea. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, teaching people how to treat you, that I think from day one, if we have anybody listening who's maybe back on the dating market or thinking about it like that, I think that is critical. And we're not responsible for someone else's behavior, but we can play a role in shaping what we will tolerate. And garbage like that, I decided from the get-go I was not going to tolerate.
Yeah, and isn't that, it's almost completely contradictory to what we've always been told is relationships are difficult, you need to make it work. I remember when we first started dating, I was saying, I don't like how he does this. And somebody I worked with, she was older, and she said, you know, you need to let a lot of things go. Guys are guys, and you need to just let it go, not pick on that. And so I kept letting things slide, and I'm not going to completely blame her because, I mean, I wanted the relationship to work. And those who are married, they are told that you don't just like flip and get divorced. You need to work at it. Marriage takes a lot of work.
And that's the thing I think so many people don't understand until they've been in it, especially if they have children together, is that is never a decision somebody makes quickly, lightly. Yeah, I think I cried every day the year before I finally called it quits, after several attempts to call it quits. And so it is like, it's not something that we make lightly. But kind of back to your point, I think this is where in the relationship, because they might evolve, but especially before we get into relationships, we have to know what our deal breakers are. we have to know what our non-negotiables are. And, I would say across the board, any sort of coercive control or abuse is like, no, deal breaker. But, there may be other things that people have as deal breakers. But if you don't know those going in, you don't know them on the front end, that contributes, I think, to a slippery slope. So being really clear and,
Yeah. Well, like you mentioned, there's that 12-year-old that's still inside of all of us. And what would you want that 12-year-old to endure? What are you willing to let that 12-year-old take on?
Yes, yes. That's what I really thought about too, especially as I started dating later. And actually, it was the thing that finally motivated me to call it quits for good is what I want my children, would I want their partners to treat them this way? And, if we wouldn't want our sons or daughters to be treated this way by a partner, like that gives us a lot of data to work with to figure out like, hey, is this something we're going to tolerate or not?
Yeah. And I think children, it's a really big, important thing to bring up because a lot of people will say, I want to stay with this person for the children. And I don't want to
Totally.
break up the marriage because of the children. But you have to flip it. If anything, that should be what pushes you to get out.
Yes, yes, yes. So many of the people I talk to related to with respect to like figuring out whether they want to stay or go, one of the biggest things that keeps them in the relationship is children. And I know it did for me. I was raised in a very high demand religion where if you don't get divorced, if you get divorced, one, Jesus won't love you anymore. And two, you'll be a bad parent. You'll be especially a bad mom. And I didn't know at the time what the research was about children being in high conflict families or having parents who are in high conflict marriages. And there was a moment, I guess just a few months before I finally pulled the plug on things, when I was standing in the kitchen of my house and my spouse had just walked off after an interaction. And I thought, oh my gosh, my children are observing and learning horrendous relationship dynamics. They're either learning that it's okay to treat a partner this way, or it's okay for them to be treated this way by a partner. And that was they were the thing that kept me in the relationship probably too long, because I thought I was doing what was best for them. But now, at that moment, I recognized, oh crap, this is not what's best for them. And, I think in some ways, each of them have repeated some of those dynamics or just behaviors in certain ways. And I think they're learning from them as they get older and have more experience in relationships. But that's my biggest regret in my divorce, was not getting out sooner, because it was really harmful for my sons.
I think a common thought process too, when people are getting divorced and they have children, is thinking that the other parent, the abusive parent, wasn't abusive to the children. They were only abusive to their spouse. So that makes them, they're not a bad parent because they weren't mean to the kids.
Right.
But any parent who is abusing the mother or the father of their children, by default, they are not a good parent.
Yes, yes. Yeah. And children are soaking up so much more than we think they are. I know when we would have conflict, we would try and go in our bedroom and do it quietly. But there's things, especially my eldest child has shared with me since then, like, yeah, I heard you and dad talking about blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, just like, it just makes me cringe. But so they're picking up on a lot more than we think and probably hope that they are.
Yeah. So I want to go back to a word, and I use this term all the time, is escalates, because that's what happens in abusive situations. But I want to bring it up because I just saw somebody post the other day. They had created a post about escalation and spotting red flags before things escalate. And somebody had commented and said, I wish we could get rid of the word escalates in terms of domestic abuse or violence, because it should instead be worded that how did they state it? That this is just the reaction due to the abuser's realization of loss of control or something, some very long-winded. And I get that person's point of trying to make sure that the focus remains, I suppose, on the abuser, that they're making this conscious effort of escalation, that it's not, I don't know. What do you think about it?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'd have to noodle on it some more. But I think my knee-jerk reaction, is it makes sense. It's a lot of words to say basically escalate, but if it drives home the fact, the reality, according to the data, that it does grow in severity, because maybe after a while verbal abuse doesn't have the intended effect, then behavior becomes more aggressive, more egregious. And so I don't know, what are your thoughts?
I don't know that you could take the word escalate out. I mean, that's exactly what happens. I understand. I suppose if you were speaking to the general public and just make a comment of abuse escalates and just leave it at that with no context of typically the abusers, I don't know. To be honest, I'm with you that it's a very long-winded explanation to more or less get to the same point. And escalates to me has sort of a stronger feeling behind it, that you like escalation means you're going up. Just
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. I wonder if, for some people, the word that's more in line with their experience is intensify. Because I think intensify can mean, it gets more frequent or it gets more aggressive or more threatening to somebody's safety. So
I suppose
intensify might be another way of thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I tend to lean towards whatever language survivors want to use. They should have the power to do that. Like, we shouldn't be trying to control their words. So,
Right.
So, yeah.
I actually heard, I'm going off not on what we were going to talk about, but it was
No
more
worries.
terminology that I heard was that instead of calling abusers abuser, they are to be called those who choose to abuse. I think that does hit home that it is a choice, that it's not that there's the excuses of, well, I was abused as a child, so of course this is just my this is the life course that I'm going to go down. I'm just an abuser, but it is a choice.
Yes. Well, I like that phrasing because it places accountability where it belongs. And I think so often those who choose to abuse just refuse all accountability. And so it really drives that home. Now, whether they take accountability or not is an entirely different thing, but it is emphasizing that this is a choice and they're using it for a purpose.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, it doesn't matter what words we use, they're still going to deny it and refuse any kind of accountability for it.
Yeah.
But
actually, a few years ago, I got a shirt that really makes me smile, because this issue of accountability, I think, is fundamental, and we don't talk about it enough, especially in close relationships. It's very simply on the front of it says, accountability is sexy. And I think, I know, like, if I could go back, I actually developed a 20-item list of things I was looking for in a new partner. And I kind of had that in there, but I would go back and add that very specifically because, and it came to me after kind of somebody in my broader circle kind of flaked in his marriage and on his kids and just like took off for a period of time, leaving his wife at the time with just all kinds of stuff. And he, like, the lack of accountability just, I think, in part destroyed their relationship. And I mean, it's one of the things I profoundly appreciate about my current partner is he is willing to be accountable. And that is so damn hot. You know, if
That
somebody's
is.
accountable, you are safe with them. It doesn't mean you're not
Yes.
going to have conflict, but I know if something gets wonky in our relationship or we communicate poorly or one of us is grumpy, I can always go to him and say, JL, this happened and I'm feeling, really crappy about it. And I know, he's not going to generally get defensive. He's going to want to talk about it. He has never in the almost 10 years we've been together raised his voice at me. Like, when people are accountable, especially romantic partners, like that's something you can build a foundation on, and a sexy one at that. That's the way I think about it.
For sure. Because, like you said, you can trust somebody that is accountable for their
Mm-hmm.
actions. Because
Yeah.
if they do something wrong, they're going to own up to it. And
Right.
oh gosh, the defensiveness of there's always a reason. Well, I did that because she did
Mm,
this, or I did that because I thought that she did this.
yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I saw another. Gosh, I have. This is why I'm so behind on doing all of my work that I'm supposed to be doing because I get stuck on these little things. I saw another post. This is all LinkedIn stuff, but it was somebody said you could tell the difference between an abuser and a victim because the abuser, when they're confronted with what they did, they have an excuse for it. So they won't necessarily say, I held a knife to her throat. They would say, sir or ma'am. I'm not going to assume one way or the
Mm-hmm.
other, but for this purpose, I'm going to say sir is the abuser, but sir, you held that knife up to her throat. And he's not going to say, yes, I did, but he's going to say, well, of course that happened because I thought she was cheating on
Mm-hmm.
me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you ask the victim, ma'am, did you hold that knife up to his throat? Well, yes, I did put a knife to his throat because I couldn't handle the abuse anymore or something along those lines. But they were
Mm-hmm.
saying that's the way that you could tell the difference between the victim and an abuser. And
Interesting.
I think it's an interesting concept. I don't know that that's a foolproof way to do that, though.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. But I think, that's why, especially early in our relationships, looking for that accountability because, there's the honeymoon period of relationships and you may not have much conflict, but it's going to come. And it doesn't mean either party did anything bad or wrong, but, maybe it was a miscommunication or just unmet needs or a conflict between the couple's needs. But recognizing early on if there's that willingness to be accountable, to me, that's a deal breaker. Like, I will never have another
Yeah.
relationship. And even to some degree, I would say in other relationships, not even in romantic relationships, if a relationship is super one-sided or, you're going to get together with friends and one of them flakes at the last minute or, there's other opportunities in relationships where I think accountability is also important because somebody who's willing to be accountable, they're also not going to feel, I think, the need to control other people because
Yeah.
they're like, I control myself. I control my outcomes, at least to some degree. They don't need to control anybody else.
You're right. Well, and if they're not taking accountability, they're trying to twist the narrative to make it not their fault.
Oh yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it is in a way controlling other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, so that's one thing that people could recognize if they're in a relationship where their partner is not or never, rarely, whatever, takes accountability. What are other signs? I always say get out before it gets too bad, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not always great about describing the different things that can happen or that do happen while you're in that relationship before it does escalate.
Yes. Yes. The older I get, the more firmly I believe in listening to our bodies. And I think especially often women are socialized, raised to ignore that. Like when we're in danger, our body is screaming at us, you're in danger, something's wrong, get out of here, get to your car, lock the doors, whatever it is. Um, and so really listening to that, I think is super important, even if it's just, a lot of times I think people can be overwhelmed by what's the behaviors in their relationship. And especially if, one day there's nice, like anytime we had a conflict, my ex would bring flowers. He would never apologize, but he would bring flowers. And I was just like, after all, I'm like, buying flowers is not a big deal. Give me a break. But where we can get tripped up is, we pay attention to the little things that are maybe going well, and not look at that overarching arc of how do we generally feel in our body when we're with them, or when we have a conflict. Does the conflict get repaired? I think that's huge. If conflict is ongoing and never really gets repaired, to me, that's a sign that we kind of need to take a step back and go, okay, is this the relationship for me? I think our bodies know when we're not safe much sooner than our minds do. Because our minds push it away. They're like, I don't want to, as they say, blow up our life and the impact on our children. But that was one, listening, because my body was just screaming, and it had been for a long time, where I was away in Portland for a conference. And the night before the conference was over and I was to fly back home, I got Thai food at this great place. And then there was too much. And so I put it in my little hotel fridge, and I was going to eat it really for breakfast the next morning before my flight. And so I heated it up in the microwave. I was like, yay, I get to have Thai food for breakfast. And then at the same moment, I was like thinking, I have to get on a plane and I have to go back and be with this person. And I was like, man, if I could import my boys here, that would be great. But my stomach was in such knots from the realization that I had to go back to that situation. I couldn't take one bite of the food. I had to throw it away. And, it was one of those clarifying moments where, like, you need to pay attention to what's going on. Your body's been telling you for a long time. Are you ready to kind of wrestle with that? And so, yeah, paying attention. What does our body do when we're around that person?
Yeah, I just started learning how to listen to my body. Like I paid attention to my body as I went through puberty and all the different hormonal changes, and I could tell what was happening in my body. But in terms of how I felt around people, I think I was taught to just ignore it or put any discomfort to the side and not worry about it.
I feel like very much I was raised like, you shouldn't think bad about people. And so we kind of shoved down any, I think, intuition that, like, this person over here. I will say my dad had a friend he'd had for a really long time, for like decades, that gave me the ick. And something happened one time when we were in a car and my dad wasn't there, and it was like, there's a reason he gave me the ick. Yeah.
Oh,
and so we should listen to that.
Yes.
Listen and don't push it away. It's there to keep us safe. Yeah.
Well, and when you're starting a new relationship and you're like, oh, I have butterflies. Well, are they butterflies, or is that your body saying, take a step back and pay attention to what you have going on here? Because, I mean, butterflies can be a good thing. It can be like an exciting, lovey sort of feeling, but it could also be some warning signs.
Yes. You're reminding me that when I started dating after divorce, I hadn't dated since high school. Initially, I'd married my high school boyfriend. So I was 43. I was excited to get out there and just see what it was about, but I had no idea what I was doing. And after a few early dates that were like such serious hard passes, a friend of mine put me onto a dating class that the state of Utah offers for free. It was like half a day. And the thing I really took away from that class is the research finds that you don't know if you can trust somebody until you've known them for 90 days. And so we should not see someone more than once a week for the first 90 days when we're dating. And I will say, we didn't necessarily intend it that way, but when my partner and I started dating, I was living in Logan, Utah. He was in Salt Lake City, and he would be in Logan for business. But like the first couple of months, him being in Logan was when I had my youngest son with me, and I wasn't introducing him to anybody, at anytime soon. And so my partner and I literally had an hour and a half together each week for the first 60 days. And that was it. And so even not getting overly invested with texting or phone calls or video chats. And So I think, again, going into a relationship with a plan about how is this going to roll, because, I think especially women, we're inclined to get emotionally invested really fast. And only seeing somebody once a week for the first 90 days helps you slow down.
Yeah. And, so many women come out of abusive relationships and they end up in another abusive relationship.
Yeah.
And it's okay. And I get it. I get wanting to prove to yourself or to prove to whomever that I can be in a relationship. I can find somebody good. And I think you're probably just forcing yourself to overlook, again, all of those gut feelings or whatever your body's telling you that it's not right. Yes. So, okay. So we talked about getting out of a relationship. Like what happens? I think we talked about ripple effects before we recorded. So what are some of the, I guess, the aftermath of what can happen, especially with, we know physical abuse, what can happen to people and those injuries. But honestly, I don't think anyone has only suffered physical violence. I think there's always some sort of psychological or emotional abuse happening in the background.
Absolutely. And what we know from the research with, non-physical abuse, whether it's emotional, financial, sexual, the impact of those types of abuse lasts way longer than physical. And the theory is it's in large part because with physical, you can look at your arm and say, he or she grabbed me or shoved me and I have this bruise. I know it happened. And with the others, you're like, did that really happen? My partner's saying it didn't really happen, or that I'm making, a mountain out of a molehill. But yeah, the impact lasts a lot longer. And I think there's probably with all of them, but depending on the type, it may vary. You're building, after you get out of the relationship, you're building trust with yourself over again. Because I think most survivors do feel like, okay, what could I have done differently? What if this was my fault? And we're never responsible for anybody else's behavior, but trying to figure out, like, how do I not repeat this? Can, I think, get consuming a lot of times. And I think for people, when they do start dating again, can say, well, I don't want this kind of relationship, or I don't want that kind of relationship. And instead they're not focusing on what they do want. And so we can kind of gravitate towards what we don't want, because that's where our focus is.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. I was just about to say something about the psychological. It'll come to me in just a second.
No worries.
Maybe. I hope.
I know.
Or it'll come to me in a week.
It's in the middle of the night. I attribute it to like midlife hormone shifts. It's like I had a thought and then it's just poof, it's gone. So
the other day I was just telling my friends, I said, do I need to get checked for like dementia? Because I feel like I'm forgetting things a lot, or is there just too much going on right now?
There is a lot going on in our world and in the broader world too. That is, stress is hard on the memory.
Yes. Well, I think that's one of the lasting effects too on people will say with strangulation and the obstruction of airflow to the brain. Of course, you can end up with memory loss. And if you've had head trauma, you can end up with traumatic brain injury. But I think the psychological effect can also lead to memory loss. And you have actually, when you look back, for those who are severely psychologically abused, they'll have chunks of their memory that are missing from, even good times, like.
And I think there's also growing evidence that being in a controlling relationship, just the stress that comes with that, also relates to later diagnosis of autoimmune disease, especially in women.
Yes.
Yeah. Chronic illness, chronic pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, this is really going to, what's going to happen. I'm going to listen. I'm going to be in my car, because that's usually when I'm listening, and I'm going to start shouting, this is what I wanted to say. It's driving me crazy.
Understood. Yeah.
Okay.
No worries.
Well, while I try to move on and not dwell on this part, but what do we do to heal? Because we have all of these things that can happen. So what do we do to heal?
Yeah. I think it looks different for different people. I think for a lot of them, it's getting out of the relationship and recognizing that they're not responsible for somebody else's behavior. And I think, again, a lot of times women are socialized to think, well, in the religion that I grew up in, like, girls, you shouldn't wear those short skirts because you're tempting the boys. And I
Oh,
remember some
yes,
specific
same.
sermons about, like, if he trips and slides into sin or whatever, like, it's your fault. I mean, it was very explicit.
Yep.
And recognizing those beliefs maybe we've been handed down, and being very specific, like, what do I believe? And is that factually true? Kind of in that vein, another question, especially if, it's not something you can point to in your earlier life, like, this is how I was socialized, but I find it super helpful in so many things as I was healing. And I think I probably do it once a week now. When stress or anxiety comes up, especially in relationships, I ask, what am I making this mean? And then, is that 100% factually true? And so if we can look back and say, what am I making it mean that I was in this controlling relationship? Does it, it can mean a lot of things to somebody. It can mean, like, I was complicit, or, well, that's the way I was raised. And so that's, we gravitate towards the familiar. But then asking, is that factually true, can really help us kind of separate where we have responsibility and where we don't. I think that's one way. And then for me, even though I was the primary breadwinner, I didn't have control of the money or where it was going. I still don't know what years of credit card bills were going towards. And I'm just like, I'm a professor in a business school. So it was like, oh my gosh, how did I let that happen? But making small decisions for myself financially afterwards was like a big, and even small decisions, I will say, like, kind of stressed me out. And I'm like, why? I'm very lucky. My dad and bonus mom are really good with money. She used to be a partner at one of the big 5 accounting firms. And so I knew I could call them and say, okay, I'm thinking about this financial decision. Like, how do you guys think about, what do you think? And frankly, I did that for probably a year or two until I got to the point where I'd made enough small decisions that became bigger decisions. And so I think really paying attention to what choices are we making and recognizing when it goes well. And even if it doesn't go really well or the way we'd hoped, does the sky fall down? Generally, it doesn't. And, if we learn from that, like, I went on a second date with that one dude, and I kind of wasn't excited on the first date. And then the second date, it was like, oh, why did I do this? Well, if we're learning from the outcomes of our decisions, and really, giving ourselves a pat on the back when it goes well. And even if it doesn't go well, okay, what can I learn from this? And I like to write things down. I'm kind of a dork. I love lists. And so writing down those things that went well, because we can kind of forget, right? We're like, I forgot. Yeah, I forgot that this went well. Like a few years ago, my partner and I were traveling somewhere together, and I said, oh, I just feel like I'm so stuck, and, I'm not really accomplishing anything. And he, like, drew his head back and looked at me. He's like, are you serious? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, you wrote a book in the last year. You started executive coaching. Like, he started listening. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. And so, really, acknowledging for ourselves where we're being successful and where our choices are serving us and giving us that life that we absolutely love, I think is really important. And looking ahead, like, you need time to look back and kind of sit with the pain and the frustration and the anxiety. But we can't stay there. Like, if we stay in that, then we're giving up the future. And in some ways, I think we might be giving up the future to that prior relationship or to that prior partner. And once we're out, like, they don't get any of that anymore.
I agree. And I think so one thing, downplaying your accomplishments, I think, is normal, because usually when you're in these relationships, any accomplishment that you may have is either they're taking credit for it, or it's not that big of a deal. It's getting played down. And
Yes,
so I
yes.
can see But I mean, those are pretty significant accomplishments that you had. But
Thank you.
the other thing is, I think that's very common is, I think we talked about it actually at the beginning, is taking blame for allowing the abuse to happen or getting into this relationship in the first place, or even, why was I chosen? What about me did they see? Am I weak? Did I look like I was going to
Yeah.
be easily manipulated? And that's why they chose me? Because I do think they choose their victims to a degree. But
Mm-hmm.
what I had a previous guest say they pick the brightest, shiniest stars.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that is completely true, because whatever they don't have, that's what they want you for.
Yes. Yes. You make them look good.
Yes.
And I think one thing you noted there that I think is super important is a lot of times people in these situations, because of the behavior that they are subjected to, and all kinds of things, we tend to make ourselves smaller. I didn't realize how small I had made myself in so many ways until I was probably several years out of the relationship. And so recognizing where we've done that, or where we've subjugated our needs or engaged in self-betrayal, like to keep the peace or to keep the relationship going or whatever, and deciding like every single day, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to take up space, and I'm going to see how, in a way, how big or how good I can get, because you don't have that person there who's like trying to push you down. Like I still remember when I got the email that I had been invited to give a TEDx talk, and I was like so excited. This was before my divorce. And so I texted my then partner, and he texted back. He was like, "That's nice." I was like, "Excuse me, what?" Like, I thought it was a big deal.
Did
But
he not know
yeah,
what a TEDx talk is?
he definitely knew. But, people who engage in bad behavior in relationships, it is, broadly speaking, I think, because they're not okay with themselves. They are lacking something. They need to feel powerful. They need to feel competent. And it's not on anybody else to help them feel that way. It's their responsibility. But when we recognize that we have been in a relationship with somebody like that who isn't comfortable being who they are, or feels like they are not good enough, and we make ourselves smaller, like recognizing what areas of my life have I been making myself smaller. And I will say I still fight this sometimes, not so much making the smaller part, but like subjugating my needs. Didn't realize until I was like 46 that I'm a people pleaser. And so there are times with my partner when he's like, "Well, where do you want to go to dinner?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't care, wherever you want to go." And, sometimes that's true. It's like, "I don't care. I'm just hungry and I want to eat now, please." And then other times I kind of do. And then I'll catch myself and go, "Meredith, why are you doing that? Like, you really want some beautifully al dente pasta for dinner. But just say it." And, every time I say it, the sky doesn't fall down. It may not be what he wants, but like catching ourselves, subjugating our needs or devaluing what we want, I think that's a huge step in the right direction, because our needs and wants matter. Does it mean we're going to get all of them met? Probably not. But if we're not aware of them, we certainly can't make anybody else aware of them and get support in doing that.
Yeah. And actually, that makes me think of, that's another sign you can look at in your partner, is if they do feel small about something, or if they feel that they're not adequate in some place in their life. If, for instance, they want this job, instead of somebody who is not a horrible person is going to do what they can to then get to that job, instead of tearing everybody else around them down to
Yeah.
make themselves look bigger.
Yep. Totally. Yeah.
I
Yep.
remembered
So
what I
yes.
was going to say.
Oh, say it.
So I think part of I think this is what I was going to say. One of the lasting psychological effects that can stay stuck is wondering, because I know I did this, is I was wondering what he was thinking all the time. I would sit and think, why did he do that? Did he know he did that? When he argued with me about this happened or that it didn't happen, when I know for a fact this actually really did happen. He really did say this, and he's saying, no, you're crazy. That never happened. Like, did he know that? Or like, does he believe all the lies that he tells? And I finally realized I had to stop and just let all of that go and not figure him out and just
Yeah.
work on learning myself instead. That was something that I was very stuck in for a very long time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it sounds very familiar. Just trying to understand. I'm a psychologist at heart and it's somewhat by training. And so what motivates people to do what they do, I find almost endlessly fascinating. But yeah, I think survivors can definitely kind of get caught in that, like trying to figure out like, why did they do that? And they're going to have all kinds of reasons. And I think for some of them, they may not even recognize what they're doing it. They just know they're trying to get a certain outcome or get us to be quiet or get us to do X, Y, or Z. But yeah, letting go of trying to understand their motivation, because I don't know that the motivation matters that much. Like we each get to choose our behavior, and they were making choices, and motivation doesn't change the behavior. Yeah, but I agree. That's hard to let go of because you want to understand. You're like, why?
Yes.
And yeah, it's hard to do that. Sure.
It is because you're a normal human. You don't think like that. Okay. I know that I've taken us into like 100 different directions.
I love it.
Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't touch on or that we missed?
Actually, I would love to point your listeners to a nonprofit that I was on the board of.
To that.
Yes. So it's a nonprofit called Finability that helps financially empower domestic abuse survivors, men, women, doesn't matter. They're a young nonprofit, just I think 3 or 4 years old, but they're doing tremendous work both in Oregon where they're headquartered and then nationally. So if you go to Finability, us.org. If you have any listeners that are really struggling with the financial side of their situation, Finability offers resources that can be super helpful. And the founder is a stalking survivor. And so she's been there, she understands. And so it's made up of a lot of people, both on the board and who work in the organization who are survivors. And so it's trauma informed. And I just can't say enough good things about it. The work that Stacy, the founder, is doing there is just, and her team is just tremendous.
Okay. And you said it's national.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yes. So they have, they've got kind of a mandate, I think, from one of their funders. So they offer one-on-one financial, like mentoring, counseling. And that is focused on, for now, just people in Oregon, but they've got a lot of other resources online and otherwise that are across the U.S. and maybe some people in other countries as well. So they're just doing, to me, they're doing sacred work.
That's awesome. I say this all the time. My favorite stories are the ones where survivors take their trauma and they see what was missing in their journey, and they create something to help others who are coming after them. And that's awesome because there's so many pieces. There's so many pieces to this where people need help, and financial is huge. That is a huge
It is. Yeah. And it's almost always present. If there's any other kind of abuse going on, financial coercion, control abuse is usually there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So do you have any links or anything that you would want to leave with listeners to contact you for anything? Okay.
Sure. They can find me on LinkedIn and I will share that with you so you can share it in the show notes or something along those lines. And then they can also connect with me via Partner Lab. So that's at mypartnerlab.co. And Partner Lab focuses on helping people get clarity in their romantic relationships, especially if they're kind of stuck in that relationship limbo, to help them figure out, do I stay or go, or, stay, but with certain conditions and for a period of time. But it's all based on relationship science. And so we're super passionate about building tools that helps people have happier, healthier relationships, or recognize it's time to bring one to a close, so that then they can get out, heal, and then potentially, come upon another relationship that's super happy and healthy. That's what I've been able to do. And I just want that for everybody else. I don't want anybody else to be stuck in that indecision for the 10 or 12 years that I was.
How does it work? Do you do like individualized classes? Do you do big webinars? What do you have? How do you
Good
guys
question.
do that?
Right now, we are focused on tools and assessments. And so using relationship science in basically online assessments that help them. Like we've got one, the Clarity 360, that gives them feedback on 12 different really important relationship factors that feed the health and satisfaction of a relationship. Our Stay Go tool, which I think will be released in the next 24 or 48 hours, that I'm just so stoked about it, because like half of our users are like, please, we want something that tells us whether we should stay or go. And we kind of steered away from it for a while, but people are yearning for it. They're yearning for that clarity. And so that one is based on a massive meta-analysis that looked at all the factors that really impact relationship quality. And there are 5 or 6. And so that's what that focuses on. And we will shortly launch a relationship decision support system that does offer more of that human element. So it's assessments, but then it's also a call with me to help the user make sense of their assessment results. And so we're building things out one at a time. But right now we're starting with those who are stuck in relationship limbo, because until you figure that piece out, you can't go on to have a better, happier, healthier relationship. And, most of my research looks at how our work and non-work lives affect one another. And we know there's a massive ripple effect, whether it's good or bad. And so helping people get out of a relationship that's not serving them will also have an effect on their career, on their parenting, on other relationships. And so that's where my passion lies right now, is just helping people get out of indecision.
Yeah. I promise I'm not going to keep you here forever, but I have another question.
Okay.
So
Sure.
Do you have ongoing research and data analyzation that you guys are using for the relationship?
I don't do research specifically in that area. Since I'm in a business school, a lot of mine focuses on other like tangential research. I have done some in like focusing specifically on psychological abuse in relationships and how that affects people at work and their creativity and job satisfaction. And we know that people who are in marital distress see a massive increase in absenteeism, so not showing up to work, or presenteeism, which is like showing up to work but not working. So people could, I think, often think about if their relationship is in distress, like that stays at home, but it doesn't. It has that ripple effect. And so every now and then I'll dip my toe in that water. But as a business school professor, most of mine is focused on things that happen in the workplace. And I just feel fortunate to have the background and expertise to jump over to relationship science and read the articles and go, okay, 3 people in the world will understand what that article said, and how can I make it usable for everybody else on the planet? Because it shouldn't just be in the hands of academics. The stuff should be in the hands of actual humans.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you're doing that.
It's fun. I really enjoy it. I feel like I've found kind of the synthesis of my career.
Yeah, I bet. Okay. So like I said, I promised that I wasn't going to keep you. So do you have any lasting words of wisdom or encouragement that you would like to leave with listeners?
That is a great question. I think, especially for those who are maybe right now in a relationship or just leaving a relationship that was controlling, know that it can get so much better. Like when I look back, if me of 2006 and 7 and 2015, like if I'd known how great my life and my career would get after I saved myself from that relationship, I would have done it so much sooner. And so things it can get better, especially once you kind of escape and free yourself from that. And you get to find out who you are, which is, it's kind of a scary thing in a way. Like it's unsettling. It's like, who am I and what do I want? But by doing that, you get to decide what you do want and who you do want to be, rather than somebody inflicting their demands or wants on you for who they want you to be. And there is nothing more freeing than being in a relationship where you get to bring your full self to the party. And so hold out for that person that lets you bring your full self to the party, because it's amazing.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Merideth, for your work and for coming on and talking with me today.
Oh, thank you so much, Ingrid. This has been a treat. I really appreciate it.
Thank you again, Merideth, for joining me today, and thank you, warriors, for listening. I've included the links Merideth was referring to, as well as her 1 in 3 profile, in the show notes. I will be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, stay strong, and wherever you are in your journey, always remember, you are not alone. Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website 1in3podcast.com. That's the number 1, IN, the number 3, podcast.com. Follow 1 in 3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1 in 3 podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1 in 3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.